we'll all walk through those pearly gates.
Yeah.
One day. That is my dream, church. I don't want to hold you long this evening. If you would just turn with me, the scripture that we'll start off with is in Proverbs chapter 31. If you would turn to Proverbs chapter 31, we'll be on our way this evening.
Good chapter.
And Proverbs has many famous verses, but this is also one of those that is extremely famous and used very much.
Yes.
In Proverbs chapter 31, starting at verse 10, it says, who can find a virtuous woman? It says, for her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth forth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth food to her household and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field and buyeth it, and with the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her lamp goeth not out by night, church. That means that she's up late working, church. In verse 19 it says, she layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. In verse 20 it says, she stretcheth out her hand to the poor. She cares about them. Yea, she reaches forth her hands to the needy. Tries to help people that are in need. In verse 21 it says, she is not afraid of the snow, not afraid of the winter time, not afraid when hard times come about. Why? Because her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates. When he sitteth among the elders of the land, she maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman who feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Now, there's lots of sermons that I find online and in World Video Bible School, and many other examples about what a woman ought to do and what a woman ought to be, and how they should be virtuous, how they should be subject to their husbands. But tonight, what I want to focus on is what a man ought to do. Okay. I want to focus on what a man should be, and some characteristics that a man shouldn't have. So this lesson is titled The Ungodly Man. Okay. The Ungodly Man, church. The ungodly man, there's about 12 characteristics that I'm going to list tonight that an ungodly man has, and therefore by implication you as a Christian man should not have. And if you're looking for a man, if you're single, then you should look for these types of characteristics in a man. First of all, an ungodly man is self-centered. An ungodly man is self-centered. An ungodly man only cares about himself. He only cares about making himself happy at the sacrifice of others. Yeah. In 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, it says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. This is a prophecy talking about how it's going to be in the last days. It says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, and unholy. Look at this example in 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 4. We know the story of Ahab and Nabal. It says, and Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face. That sounds like something Bella would do. You tell her no, she go and lay down and turn her head the other way. He's pouting because Naboth said, I'm not going to give you my father's inheritance. For one, because God told him not to. He turned his face and it says he would eat no bread. We're going to get a little bit more into this story a little later. But understand that the reason why Ahab is self-centered is because he wanted the vineyard for himself because it was nice and it was near to his kingdom. And he wanted to have the fruits and everything to himself, knowing the commandment of God that he had given to Naboth. So these are examples of ungodly men showing self-centeredness. Number two, an ungodly man is not sober-minded. Many scriptures that teach us to be sober. And people use the example when Paul told Timothy to drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. They say because Paul told Timothy to drink a little wine for his stomach's sake, that allows me to be able to drink some wine whenever I feel like it. But okay, let's say that's the example. Let's say that's true, okay? Let's say that's true. Now, what about the 10 scriptures that teach men to be sober? What does sober mean? What does being sober mean? Now, it literally means to not be drunk with alcohol, to not be under the influence of anything. That's what being sober means. So, when is it that you get drunk? When you drink. Okay. At what point when you drink do you become drunk?
Help me somebody.
Is it after one drink, 2, 3? What do the cops say?
You're right.
Exactly. What do the cops say? What is the blood alcohol content that you have to have in order to be physically impaired from driving? Well, they say any. It's in
the book. That's how it is, brother.
Once you have one drink, just one, you have already been physically impaired and cannot drive as if you were sober. What does that mean, preacher? That means that after one drink, you're drunk. And yes. The Bible says specifically, be not drunk with wine.
Yes.
So what does that tell you? That means that you shouldn't drink at all. A characteristic of an ungodly man, he's not sober-minded. Look at Proverbs chapter 23. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 29. It's starting at verse 29. It says, who hath woe? Who hath sorrow?
Yes.
Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling?
Who
hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? You know what he's describing? He said, they that tarry long at the wine. Wait a minute. What does that mean, preacher? What does that mean? He said, these people that have woe, have sorrow, have contentions, have babblings, have wounds without cause, they have red eyes, those people tarry long at wine. But what does that mean to tarry? To tarry means to look. They look long at wine. What is that? Wait a minute. You're saying it's a sin to look at wine? When I go to the grocery store, I see the aisle. I see sometimes they have chips on the same aisle as the wine. So you mean I can't go get some chips? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. See, think about what Job said. Job said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look on a maiden. Does that mean that he's not going to see her? When he sees, oh, can't look at you, you're sinning. No, what he's saying is he's not going to desire it. They that desire long at the wine. Those people that desire the wine. they that go to seek mixed wine. It says, look not thou upon the wine when it is red. What does that mean? Does that mean we can't look at it? No, that means don't even desire it. It says, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright, at the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. You know, when you're drunk, you say things that you normally wouldn't say.
It's about to happen, brother.
Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? And look what it says. It says, I will seek it yet again. This was happening. This was happening. Ungodly men are having all of these things that are described here happen to them. They become numb. They say things that they ought not to say. They do things that they ought not to do. People getting drunk, getting in car accidents, killing people, getting drunk, beating on their wives, getting drunk, abusing their children, getting drunk, and you name it.
Oh, list there, brother.
And then it says, when shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. It's a problem there, church. It's a problem there. Not sober-minded and ungodly man. The next characteristic of an ungodly man has no self-control. An ungodly man has no self-control. In Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 11, it says, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. What does that mean? A fool uttereth all his mind. You know, when people say, I can't help it, I got no filter. Well, you need to help it. A fool uttereth all his mind. A fool doesn't have a filter.
No, you don't.
It says, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. You know what that means? Think before you speak.
You best to.
Doesn't that make sense?
You best to.
Think before you speak. That's all. That's all. In Proverbs chapter 16, verse 32, it says, he that is slow to anger, have some self-control. Yeah. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. That's real strength. Yeah. Real strength is from within. It's not, I got all these muscles, you can't see me, you can't whoop me. No, it's real strength comes from being able to deal with everybody's mess.
You said everybody's mess.
That's where real strength comes from. And that's God's strength. Think about having to deal with men for millennia. For millennia. Billions of us. Billions of knuckleheads. For millennia. Slow to anger. It says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. You're stronger if you're able to control what you say out of your mouth.
That's right. Yes, you
and if you're as strong as Mike, the number one heavyweight champion. Mike Tyson, whoever, Muhammad Ali, whoever. It's better for you to be able to control the words that come out of your mouth. Right. That's what real strength is. An ungodly man has no self-control. So to be godly, control yourself. Control what words come out of your mouth. Ungodly man also has no prayer life.
No, you don't.
He thinks that he can handle everything himself. He won't ask for help. In James chapter 4 and verse 2 and 3 it says, ye lust, you want some stuff, and have not. Ye kill and desire to have, and cannot obtain. Ye fight in war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not. It's talking about all these nations spreading their empires because they want more. Going out and killing people and going to war because they want more. God says, you don't have what you want because you didn't ask. All you had to do was pray. And then he says, then you want to ask. He says, ye ask and you don't get it because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lust. You praying for things that you just lusting for. You don't need that.
Right.
An ungodly man has no prayer life. He wants to do it all himself. He doesn't ask, and then when he asks amiss so that he can consume his lust.
That's the Bible, man, bro.
Speaking of lust, an ungodly man, he loves to lust with his eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that walk by.
There he is.
In Judges chapter 16 and verse 1, says, Then went Samson to Gaza, and saw there an harlot, and went in unto her.
He did.
As soon as he saw harlot and went to her. You wonder what he saw. Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 28, it says, But I say unto you that whosoever looketh unto a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart.
Yep, that's deep, brother.
The ungodly man looks at other women when he got a perfectly beautiful woman at home. One that loves him more than anything. But you want to look elsewhere. That's an ungodly man.
Well, what you said.
An ungodly man hates biblical reproof.
Don't he?
An ungodly man hates biblical reproof.
Help me there, brother.
Somebody comes to you with scriptures in the Bible saying, hey, listen, man, I don't agree with what you said because the Bible says this. No!
That's him.
Not so.
Right.
In Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 10, it says, A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool.
That's right.
Somebody coming to you with reproof in the Bible. It should enter you if you're a wise man. That's what Proverbs says. It says, if you're a wise man, a reproof will enter you easier than 100 stripes on a fool. It's saying you could beat a fool 100 times and they still won't get it.
Still.
That's true.
Hard-headed.
100 times.
That's it.
But a wise man, you just talk to them and they'll change.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lord have mercy. I hope I don't have to beat none of my children 100 times. I hope I don't raise no fools, Lord. Lord have mercy. It would be nice, wouldn't it? Just talk to them. Just tell them and they change. Lord have mercy. An ungodly man hates biblical reproof. And an ungodly man pretends to be religious.
All the time.
They pretend. They're not really godly. They act like it. In 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 5, it says, having a form of godliness.
That's it right there.
They have a form of godliness. They hear, they kind of go through the motions. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. An ungodly man only pretends to be religious. A real godly man worships God in spirit and in truth with all of his might. That's what spirit means. Spirit with all of your might, in truth by his word. An ungodly man justifies his own sin.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
Don't he?
Well, the reason why I did it was because you. Well, the reason why I'm like this is because you. Well, if you would have did this, then I wouldn't have.
That's not right, brother.
Justifies his own sin. In Luke chapter 16 and verse 15, it says, And he said unto them, Ye are they which justify yourselves before men. You want to make yourself look good in front of men.
Yeah.
But God knoweth your heart.
Every day.
You can't hide from God. For that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God. An ungodly man tries to justify himself, tries to make an excuse. Well, I did this because of this. Well, if you wouldn't have, then I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
An ungodly man tries to justify himself when he knows that he's wrong. An ungodly man hates God's preachers. This goes back to biblical reproof. They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to admit when they're wrong. In 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 17, it says, "And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah," Ahab again, "that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel?"
The preacher man, huh?
He said that the preacher was causing trouble. And Elijah said, he said, "I have not troubled Israel,
No.
but you
You, that's it. It's you.
and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord,
That's it.
and thou hast followed Baalim."
That's it.
An ungodly man hates God's preachers. He hates men of God. An ungodly man is also surrounded by other ungodly men. He's close friends with ungodly men.
Yes.
Evil communications.
Every
In
time,
Psalms
brother.
chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly." He doesn't walk in it. "Nor standeth in the way of sinners." He doesn't stand in it. "Nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." And he doesn't sit in it.
That's right.
Well, right.
Where is he at?
Exactly.
But his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in his law doth he meditate day and night.
Every day.
An ungodly man, you'll see him because he's surrounded by other ungodly men. An ungodly man also won't leave his home.
Well,
I didn't hear it, brother.
I want you to turn with me here. 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 7. This is just only one example. I mean, the very first one was when Adam took the fruit from Eve. That was the very first example of a man not taking charge of his home. Well, here's another one.
Okay.
In 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 7. I hope you're there. It says, "And Jezebel," oh Jezebel. I would never ever name one of my kids Jezebel.
Come on, brother.
When I see people that have their kids named Jezebel, I'm like, what are you thinking? That's like almost naming their kid Satan. Like, why would you do that? Why? Anyway, and Jezebel, his wife, said unto him, "Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite."
Okay, yeah.
So she wrote letters in Ahab's name
Did she? Lord have mercy.
and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and the nobles that were in his city dwelling in Naboth. And she wrote in the letters saying, "Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king. And then carry him out and stone him that he may die."
Come on, Jezebel.
And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles who were the inhabitants in his city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them.
Lord have mercy.
And as it was written in the letters which she had sent him, they proclaimed the fast and set Naboth on the high among the people. And there came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him. And the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, "Naboth did blaspheme God and the king." Jezebel was slick.
Yeah.
See, what she did was she put him in a high position. See, if Naboth was just a man minding his business, and they said, that guy over there, he blasphemed against God and the king, they might not have been able to get away with stoning him. But see, when you put somebody in authority, they're held to higher regard. So she put him in a high place and then tarnished his reputation so that then people would be okay with him being killed. That's what she did. They carried him forth out of the city and stoned him with stones that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. Jezebel got him killed. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go to meet Ahab, king of Israel, which is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, whither he is gone down to possess it. And thou shalt speak unto them, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Hast thou killed, and also taken possession? And thou shalt speak unto them, saying, Thus saith the Lord, in the place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine.
Yes, sir. It happened too.
Naboth didn't leave his home. He let Jezebel take over. And he ended up destroying him. An ungodly man won't leave his home. And lastly, an ungodly man won't provide for his family. Now, there are different situations.
Yes, it is.
There's situations where the man doesn't make as much as the woman does.
That's true.
There's situations where the men might stay home. There's different situations. But this is what the problem is. When a man is not willing to provide for his family, when he just they call them sugar mamas.
Yeah. Well, what other name? What other things that there?
Let her take care of it. It says in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8, but if any provide not for his own, this is not my opinion, church. It says, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. An infidel is an unbeliever. God said if you don't provide for your own family, you're worse than an unbeliever.
That's right.
An ungodly man is not willing to provide for his family. So by implication, we know that we shouldn't have any of these characteristics if we want to be godly. If we want to be godly men, we ought to do the opposite of the things that I've described. We ought to not be self-centered. We ought to care about others. We ought to be sober. We ought to not let us be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or any of the such. We ought to have self-control. We ought to think before we speak. We ought to pray and ask God for help, for guidance to help us to lead our family. We ought to not look at everything that walks by. We ought to be able to accept when we're wrong. We ought to be able to understand and accept biblical reproof. We ought to be truly religious. To have true religion and not just pretend, not have a form of godliness. We should never justify our wrongs. We should always admit when we're wrong. We should love God's preachers. We should love men that are trying to preach the gospel, to save souls before it's everlasting too late. We should be friends with people in the church. We should be friends with people that teach sound doctrine. Don't let evil communications corrupt your good morals. We should be the leader of our home. And we should provide for our family. I hope you got a blessing from this lesson. And I hope that all the men will be godly men as God has called us to be. If there's anybody that has any need, that wants the desires of the church to pray for them, or if there's anybody that would like to become a member of the Church of Christ, you come by hearing, believing, repenting, confessing of your sins, and being baptized and being added by God to the one church that Christ died for in the Bible. If you're anybody subject to that, won't you come while together we stand and sing?
He's
Sweet, I know.
He